The mural that you see around you has been here for a long time, but I think it wasn't always quite as animated as we wanted to make it. And so we would invite a lot of groups and kind of tell them about like what it was like to come to UIC and things like that. And we felt like really engaging with the mural was an important opportunity to also have them come away with a lot of real understanding about Latin American history, Latinx communities, and also kind of understand more about each other as a group. So people that come in this room can use the art as a way to learn from each other too. So the tours go around the whole room and we talk about each scene, but we also have a few points where we engage with the participants to say, what do you see? And realize that art is, always has multiple interpretations, and that's a lot like life and society. And a single event might happen and a lot of different groups witnessing that get different interpretations out of it, right? And all of those can be right at once or can be true at once. And understanding where people are coming from and the different perspectives that they have about situations can help us better understand how to move forward and how to find solutions to our challenges, right? And so I think we try to use the multiple interpretations of the art to get at our different understandings of identity and culture and some of the challenges that we face in society too. So I think that was the core of some of using the artwork for these conversations. This mural is really rich. There's a lot of different scenes, and so it often depends on what the group is and maybe what kind of class they're coming from. So if they're a gender women's studies class, we might kind of highlight more of the themes of gender. If they're a Latin American Latino studies class, we might highlight some more of the historic figures from Latin American history that are featured in the mural. But I think with every group, we try to really engage with several key themes: immigration, environmental justice, and kind of cultural identity and diversity, and thinking about diversity as an asset, especially because we're on this really diverse campus, and that shouldn't just mean we have different faces in a room, but that we're really learning from different people and thinking about the different approaches that we have to situations as a tool for creativity and for creative solutions to challenges. So a couple of the scenes that you might see behind me, we've got a scene of a wrecking ball, and next to that is a Puerto Rican flag that are both kind of in bubbles. And if you go to the right part of the room, the bubbles almost seem to come together, like the wrecking ball is flying towards that flag. And so that kind of speaks to the feeling of gentrification in Humboldt Park. And connects to other communities as well that are experiencing neighborhood change and thinking about who has a right to identity in a community. And I think that's one of the interesting things that Duarte would bring to this, is thinking about perspective and layout, and where in the room you are really speaks to the different themes that come out. But a lot of people in this room have experienced, gentrification and neighborhood change. And how do you share those stories and learn from other people's experiences and think about how there's positives and negatives and who's affected by those issues? So it's hard to spark those conversations, and art can be a tool for doing that. So this very neighborhood, well, first of all, it was an indigenous community first, but for much of the 20th century and even earlier than that, it was a diverse immigrant community, and there were a lot of different folks that lived here and centered around the Hull House Community Center and places like that. But this was also the hub of the largest Latino community in the mid-20th century, and that included my grandfather and some of my family as well. And so they were displaced when the school was established, and so that created also a legacy of tension, right? These people who were kicked out then aren't invited to be part of the student population in its early years. And so there's a scene of a wrecking ball with a UIC building, and I think that really speaks to that displacement that is part of the legacy of this school. And we can't forget that, right? We need to continue to honor those communities and include them in this educational space. As a public research institution, it should be available for all. And so it's kind of ironic to be, part of this community now as at UIC, even though I was part of that legacy that was kicked out too, right? Just to my left, the hub for social change. And I think it's one of the more mysterious scenes for people coming in, because they see a lot of different symbols and sort of cosmic, galaxies going on. And so a lot of the indigenous symbols there represent cultures from all across the Americas. We've got the Inuit through the igloo. We've got a symbol from Machu Picchu in South America. There are symbols from the Caribbean and the Pacific Islands as well. And so kind of connecting the first communities of the Americas together in conversation with one another, I think is really powerful. But it also roots it here at UIC. And there's kind of another trick to the mural where the carpet used to be red, and it gave this illusion of depth as if the wall was breaking away to look at the quad on the other side. And so instead of our lecture center buildings, you instead see these Mayan pyramids and Taino stones. And so those histories then matter here too, and should be part of what we're learning and who we're learning from. And, you know, I think transforming this university by creating a space like this also was part of trying to transform what we learn here and who's welcome here and whose stories matter here as well.
So speaking of that, can you maybe share some stories that you've learned from visitors to the space?
Yeah.
Just making sure it's the roller.
Every group we bring in, you know, sees something new and different and is constantly having us rethink what we think we know about the symbols here. And I think, you know, it's always changing based on what's happening in the world as well. We've got a scene of incarceration that used to kind of really resonate with people in terms of political activism and artists that have been jailed for speaking out. But more recently, a lot of people will see detention and deportation. And I think that really resonates with what's happening with their own families and with the news. And we also have, you know, the scenes I think about the indigenous communities. A lot of people are thinking about like water and land rights right now too, and so we'll have a lot of folks that see the connections between those different cultures as a really important conversation, that this isn't stuck in the past, right? That indigenous communities are part of our everyday life as well. And so I think that's been really interesting to see how different groups bring new interpretations all the time, and that those interpretations can kind of be right at once too, right? Is a really powerful thing. So UIC is a real hub of activism. There are a lot of student organizations here. It has a long history of students really speaking out about injustices right here on campus, as well as nationwide and global issues that they feel need to be changed, right? This very center exists because of student activism, and I think this mural also exists because of student activism. Students were, you know, formed a committee and gathered funding and found the artist and really sought out Duarte because he got that and he really resonated with their sense of social justice. And so the scenes in the art, I think, remind us of that history, but also continue to inspire new groups here every day. We've got, you know, over the warrior eagle that Rosa was talking about earlier, there's different historic figures who have led movements throughout Latin America and the US. And I think that they help to remind us that there are also many different ways to create social change, that being on the front of a picket line may be part of it, but also, you know, writing and advocating for, you know, environmental change and justice. Like all of there's different ways to be a part of that. Beneath the warrior eagle, we also have a scene of collective action, and in the center is a symbol for the Fearless Undocumented Alliance, which is a student organization here on campus. And they were founded out of an act of vandalism where somebody wrote on posters on our walls, and so they wanted to respond to that hateful message with a more positive organization. And so they used this space and used the artwork, I think, to kind of speak to their sense of support for one another and solidarity. And you know, a space is more than just somewhere where we hang art. It's also like someplace that can be brought to life to continue to make change every day. We have a lot of different classes that come in here, and so they may be thinking about like what they're studying in class. So if it's urban planning and they're looking at environmental, you know, infrastructure, or if it's a dance class, like they're thinking about those kinds of skills and talents that they have as assets. And So it's really cool to have them think also as their cultural heritage is an asset, and the values and practices that they learn growing up or that they gain from their community also as assets, and kind of sharing those things with one another. And so the artwork is a way to think about that. We had that dance class come in and talk about their personal stories of immigration, and then they use those as the inspiration for their final dance performances. We've had people, use the art also to think about issues that they're having in their classes interpersonally, right? And how can they think about how people of the past have solved these challenges too. So it's a space of learning and of sharing many different views as well. There are a lot of really challenging topics that are covered in this mural, and sometimes it can get a little contentious almost among the groups that come in. Right behind me we've got a scene of a man with a gun, and he represents the Zapatista movement in southern Mexico. And that was founded in the 1990s, right? So it was on people's minds when this mural was created. But it continues to be an active, organization. And I think a lot of the themes that they brought up about indigenous rights, land rights, cultural identity continue to resonate with a lot of groups around the world. And so some folks will come in and say, oh my gosh, that's violence. And other groups kind of recognize the motives that they were going for and think about how there's different ways that people have fought for those issues too. Also behind me, we've got a scene of a skeleton man who represents the kind of colonization of Latin America. And that speaks to a lot of the death and destruction that was experienced by indigenous communities. And it's part of this heritage, and yet that doesn't have to be the only way that cultures come together either. And I think unfortunately that's a common view right now with all this white nationalist view that if we only have one kind of person, maybe that'll be okay, when that doesn't have to be the only answer, right? We can have a lot of people come together that are different and learn from that, and that be a beautiful thing when there's solidarity and creativity and inspiration out of that. But without acknowledging that past and thinking that we've only ever been one kind of person, or that there's only one way to be Latin American or one kind of person from Latin America, then you're missing all the beauty and diversity that exists there too. And there's a lot of joy in exploring those different ways. And so some of the conversations we have here are really fascinating because people think that there's this one thing, and then we're able to break down those stereotypes through conversation.